Welcome to a joint committee session. This is a discussion. There are going to be no votes today on this, but we're joint between our Education and Culture Committee and our Health and Human Services Committee. And we're talking about the blueprint for Maryland's future. I am just going to dispense of a few personal comments because I served on the Kerwin Commission for a little over 3 years. And based on that work of the Kerwin Commission, the General Assembly came up with the blueprint for Maryland's future that was basically designed to ensure that we revamp our school system here in the state of Maryland from beginning to end, from what we say now is pre-K to J, really looking at all the different aspects to ensure that those career pathways are strong and that our children enter the system ready to learn. And so from that standpoint, we're going to hear today about some of the great work that has already taken place, as well as is planned in the upcoming year to get us ready for the blueprint. Many of you, however, have seen that there's been a lot of conversation around some of the interrupters that happened that have adjusted the blueprint timeline, namely COVID and us being out of school have certainly interrupted some of the challenges that we've seen when it comes to adhering to all of the different benchmarks that were associated with the blueprint for education. And so from that standpoint, it really is one where I think it's smart for us to press the reset button a bit, if you will, to make sure that we're level setting where we are, not just here in Montgomery County, but as a state. And then are able to really figure out the best pathway moving forward, understanding we want to seize some of the great things that have been happening in our communities, not across just here in Montgomery County, but across the state, but then also really think about some of the great and innovative work that's happened when we think about our hubs that were stood up, those equity hubs that did great things. When we talk about Councilmember Navarro's push for wellness centers in our schools that are tied directly into the community school model. There's so many things that are out there that we have been talking about as an individual jurisdiction that we've focused on for years that have been a part of really what's encompassed in this blueprint for Maryland's future. And so from that standpoint, I'm excited. I'm excited because we're on the cusp of great things that are happening here in this county when it comes to education. Don't be fooled by some of the naysayers who think that that our school system is not operating at very high efficiency. It is. And just like anything else, we can make it better. We can make it better and make it better for more people. And that's what I think the objective of the blueprint is. It really is to ensure that that same level of success that we've seen for so many in this county is there for every single student in Montgomery County. Not just those that are connected, not just those who have well-intentioned and passionate parents who can adjust to give support that's necessary, but for every single child, regardless of their circumstance. That's what we all want. And so it's great to be able to have something like this that's enshrined in policy and law that really talks about what it is that we need to accomplish to make that happen. That end goal is something that we all want. So with that, colleagues, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez, who has done a phenomenal job in setting up this packet, who will then turn it over to Ms. Backey and Ms. Robinson to give a presentation. Ms. Backey is our newly minted, I can still say that because I think it's been less than a year, Ms. Backey, but our newly minted Blueprint for Maryland's Future coordinator within Montgomery County Public Schools. So she is the person who's responsible for making sure that we're doing everything that the blueprint has laid out for us as statewide policy and law. So let me turn it over to you, Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez, to give us a little bit of level setting, and then from there, we'll turn it over to our presenters. We have a very long list, and so instead of going through that extremely long list of folks that are here with us today, let me just welcome all of our partners from our Office of Management and Budget, as well as our Office of Intergovernmental Relations, our Director of Strategic Partnership with the County Executive. We've got a whole bunch of folks from Montgomery County Public Schools, including Mr. DeAndrea, who's the Chief of Staff there, and of course, with OMB, as well as Ms. Robinson, who is a principal associate with ABT Associates, and Ms. Backey will describe that relationship that we have with ABT. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez, to go ahead and get us started. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I begin, let me turn over to my co-chair, Council President Albornoz, for some opening remarks as well before I turn to Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez. Sorry about that, Mr. President.
Oh, my goodness, no worries. Just Chairman Rice, thank you. I know you have seen the evolution of this document, which we were about to discuss this morning, and we're on the ground level in its development. We've all appreciated your leadership on this. We know you have spoken about it often to us and our colleagues and our public. And so we have been in good hands. And the framing of this blueprint, as I was reviewing it, is consistent with what we've been doing here in our community for quite some time. And the leadership that this council has shown, led by Councilmember Navarro, around early childhood and education with support of all of our colleagues, is one of many examples, as well as in the area of workforce development, where we understand that this continuum is critically important and has to work collectively together. And the fact that the state is moving this forward to advance this and raise all boats is important as well. So we look forward to this discussion and that partnership with our General Assembly and this and future governors to help make sure we have the resources that we need to reinforce the work that's already happening here, because our community, for so many reasons, continues to be the economic engine of this state, and we have to continue on that path. So look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Co-Chair. Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good morning, council members. We're excited to be here today to present the first Blueprint for Maryland's Future Committee meeting for the Montgomery County Council. And with us, as you'll see on your Zoom screen, we have some of the amazing individuals who are here helping to implement the blueprint in the county. Now, today mainly consists of a substantive presentation and discussion with the staff on the blueprint, including the Office of Intergovernmental Relations, Office of Management Budget, MCPS, Health and Human Services, and more. And so I just will start sharing my screen on a presentation that will set the stage for the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, as this is the first meeting. And so what you'll be hearing today is first a timeline on the blueprint creation, as well as an overview of the 5 key policy areas, including the Accountability and Implementation Board. I'll then discuss briefly the governing body responsibilities before turning it over to Ms. Backey, who is our Blueprint Implementation Coordinator, to hear updates on her work and her roles, as well as a summary of recent actions in the policy areas. We'll then discuss some of the fiscal requirements for the county, as well as then turn into a larger discussion into the early care and education policy area at the end. So in 2016, the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education was established, and they had 2 goals. One, to review and recommend any needed changes to current education funding formulas, and 2, to make policy recommendations to enable Maryland's pre-K system to perform at the level of the best performing systems in the world. They released preliminary reports in 2018 and 2019, and their final report in December 2020, it summarized all of their policy recommendations, cost estimates and savings, funding priorities, and funding formula recommendations. And the report is framed among 5 key policy areas, and that's 1, high quality early childhood education and expansion, 2, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, 3, college and career readiness, 4, more resources to ensure all students are successful, and 5, governance and accountability. So on the state level in 2019, the General Assembly passed the preliminary blueprint bill, Senate Bill 1030, which included targeted funding for fiscal years 20 through 22 on the following areas: full day pre-kindergarten funding, teacher salary grants, concentration of poverty grants, special education funding, mental health coordinator funding, and supplemental instruction grants. And you'll see at this bullet that Montgomery County received between $24 to $31 million, depending on the fiscal year. In 2020, the official Blueprint for Maryland's Future legislation was introduced, which includes approximately $3.8 billion of funding for a 10-year period to support the 5 key policy areas. And in 2020, the General Assembly passed this legislation. However, it was vetoed to the governor in part due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, the General Assembly overrode the veto and also passed a revision bill, House Bill 1372 at the time, which included revisions to updating funding timelines and formula calculations. And now the 10-year period for the blueprint is fiscal year 2023, the year that we're about to enter, through fiscal year 2034. So now I'll present a high overview of the 5 key policy areas. And please note that Ms. Backey will discuss the recent updates and actions on some of the areas, as well as have that further discussion on early care and education. So the first is high quality early childhood education and expansion. And the goal for the commission was to create an equitable foundation for school readiness. And some of the ways that they recommended doing that is introducing a mixed delivery system with public and private providers and prioritizing 3- and 4-year-olds from low-income households. They recommended increased public funding for both public and community providers, as well as expansion of centers that already exist that are supporting these students and families, as well as increasing the supply of early childhood education teachers. The second area was high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, with the goal to develop, attract, and retain talented and diverse school leaders. And by doing that, they recommend elevating the teaching profession to a high status profession, including teacher raises, a higher starting salary, as well as additional funding incentives for being a nationally board certified teacher. It also recommends creating a leadership development system, redesigning the teacher career ladder, improving recruitment and professional development, and increasing the rigor of teacher preparation programs. The third priority area was college and career readiness. And the goal was to advance student readiness for post-secondary education or career and technical education. And by doing that, they recommend establishing a curriculum to be college and career ready by 10th grade, including setting standards in English and math that match global standards, implementing an instructional system to keep students on track, creating career and technical education system to produce work-ready graduates, and developing alternative educational approaches for students not on track, as well as providing the access to those post-college and career readiness pathways. The fourth priority area is more resources to ensure all students are successful, with the goal of reducing disparities in performance and inequities in school funding. And they recommended establishing a transitional supplemental instruction for struggling learners program, provision of concentration of poverty school grants, revision of funding formulas for English learners, special education, and farms or free and reduced meal student eligible students. They also recommended enhancing training to identify student needs and connecting student resources, as well as increasing state-level school-based health center support. And finally, the fifth policy area is governance and accountability. And their recommendation was to create a new independent board to ensure the recommendations are successfully implemented and produce the desired results. And on February 21st, 2021, they established the Accountability and Implementation Board, or the AIB, and their charge is to develop a comprehensive state implementation plan and to review the local implementation plans that are submitted as a result. They also have the ability to withhold funding for non-compliance of the blueprint implementation, as well as will be required to develop a leadership development program for Board of Education members and principals and evaluate submitted data on the success of blueprint components. However, as the chair mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, there has been some timeline delays for the start of the AIB, and the first meeting wasn't held until November 15, 2021. And Ms. Backey will discuss some of the more recent updates on the timeline, potential timeline changes soon. So now I just wanted to discuss the governing body's roles and responsibilities, and that really relates to the county level agencies. So in Montgomery County, our governing body is the County Council, the County Executive, and MCPS, or Montgomery County Public School System. And the first charge was to appoint a blueprint implementation coordinator, which was done so on October 18th. Ms. Janine Backey was hired through MCPS, appointed by the governing body, and her role is to ensure the compliance of the implementation of the blueprint. And her presentation will discuss her role and responsibilities and her progress so far. The second item was to collaboratively develop a local implementation plan. And the original deadline is June 15, 2022, but again, that timeline may change. And so now I'll turn it over to Ms. Janine Backey before discussing fiscal requirements.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today. Let's see. I'm trying to pull up my slides.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be working on the blueprint and also to be returning to work in Montgomery County and working with all the various stakeholders who are involved in the blueprint process. I'm not able to share my screen.
Janine, I'm sharing right now, but if you'd like to share it, I can definitely turn it over to you.
No, that would be fine.
Okay.
I was just looking to see if my slides would come up on the screen. What I'll start doing is talking a little bit about sort of a high-level update on what's been happening in each of the blueprint areas. As was earlier mentioned, the start date of the AIB was November 2021. And so the Accountability and Implementation Board has been working to gather all their members to work on staffing and to essentially raise up a new state agency, a new state entity that will be working very closely in conjunction with MSDE and the county governments and school systems across the state. So I'll talk a little bit about the early childhood education and expansion. There have been 4 technical assistance meetings held by MSDE to inform folks about the blueprint and each of those areas. Also, they have issued 2 requests for proposal for preschool development grants and preschool expansion grants under the blueprint, and a pre-K implementation planning document. So they've started that process in trying to engage school systems and community providers in applying for blueprint dollars and moving forward. The next is high quality, diverse teachers and leaders. The Maryland State Department of Education has made a presentation to the Accountability and Implementation Board that talks about the National Board Certified Teachers. It also helped to provide sort of a statewide picture on where we are in terms of the number of nationally board certified teachers and how there is a plan for those teachers to first go into state identified low performing schools and help to raise the achievement and to help to close some of the gaps for our students most in need. Montgomery County has the highest number of nationally board certified teachers. We're slightly over 500. We're the largest number in the state, and we have additional cohorts of national board certified teachers who are working to reach that credential. The state has also, under this area, made plans for developing expert review teams, and they are gathering names of interested parties through application who will serve on teams who will go out to each of the jurisdictions and help to monitor some pieces of the implementation of the blueprint. And then there will be further guidance and information coming out regarding the career ladder. So for the college and career ready and CTE, or career and technical education area, there's been a revised implementation timeline. MSDE will collaborate with local school systems, and there will be a revision of the college and career standard in 2024-2025, and there will be a new course sequence. So the state has been moving to adjust that timeline and some of the expectations for next year. They will also raise a new sort of governor's workforce board that will be involved in setting this new standard for college and career ready. So there's a lot more coming. Under more resources to ensure all students are successful, the Maryland State Department of Education, in conjunction with the Accountability and Implementation Board, will be issuing out what they're calling a playbook, and that will include information and guidance regarding the community schools. The state has also been looking at neighborhood indicators of poverty in a larger ongoing study, and sort of looking to compare the levels of poverty in each of the jurisdictions across the state. They've also been, there's an English language learner work group, and they have issued out a report with some findings and recommendations. So we'll be hearing a little bit more about that as the state rolls out these various playbooks. And then also, they will be, again, looking at these neighborhood indicators of poverty, but this will be an ongoing this will be some ongoing work into the fall of 2022. So I just also want to add that while the blueprint is being rolled out, the Maryland State Department of Education is rolling out a new strategic plan. In the words of the state superintendent, they're reimagining the Maryland State Department of Education to make it more accessible and for there to be more community engagement. So it will, this new strategic plan will guide the organizational directions of the Maryland State Department of Education in order to implement the blueprint for Maryland's future. And the strategic plan will build on the objectives of the blueprint, and it will detail how MSDE will collaborate with stakeholders in order to actualize the vision of the blueprint. The other area I'll just give a quick update on is governance and accountability. And you'll hear a little bit more about that as I talk about providing a quick update on the developments of the AIB. But also I would like to say for these areas, the Maryland State Department of Education in conjunction with the AIB is going to be producing and disseminating what they're calling playbooks for each of these areas: community schools, career ladder, college and career readiness, and a guide to supporting what they've identified as state low performing schools. So these new playbooks will help us to implement specific initiatives. They will be providing clear explanations, templates, tools, recommendations, research, and best practices. So there's certainly more to come. That's just a high level look at what's happening in each of the blueprint areas. Like I said, there's certainly more information to come from MSDE and also from the Accountability and Implementation Board as they raise that entity to a state agency, to the level of a state agency. So I'll say that. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the role. I'm not sure if I can pull up the slides. It says I can't share the slides while someone else is sharing, or will the slides come up for the next section?
Currently sharing it right now. Is everyone able to see it?
I don't see it.
Yes.
I don't see it on the screen.
Yeah, we can see them.
It just says fiscal requirements.
Fiscal
but I don't
requirements,
see the
yeah.
slides.
Yeah, they advance it. Yeah.
It doesn't. I don't see the other
Not
slides.
hers, yeah.
I will reshare. It seems that some people can see it, some can't, so I'm going to try again. Hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Of course, sorry about that. I was seeing it on my side, so.
Here we go. It's come up. So I've just provided you with a brief overview of what's happening. There is a lot more to come in terms of the Accountability and Implementation Board, and they're continuing to gather their staff and so to build their entity and organization. So there's more information to come. I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about my roles and responsibilities. As I said, it's a pleasure to be working with all the community stakeholders on the blueprint and to work together to see the vision and to actualize the blueprint over a period of time. I'm jointly appointed, as Nicole mentioned, by the Montgomery County government and MCPS, and the work is guided and supported by a joint steering committee, including stakeholders from county government, MCPS, and other community stakeholders. It's my role to oversee the implementation of the blueprint and provide oversight, input, and recommendations that are aligned with the blueprint outcomes, and also to ensure compliance with all criteria from the new Accountability and Implementation Board, to establish collaborative relationships with the county executive, county council, county agencies, higher education institutions, economic development organizations, childcare providers, nonprofit entities, and other state or local government units identified by the AIB, nonprofit entities, and others. I lead and coordinate the development and submission of the implementation plans by the governing units operating in Montgomery County. I facilitate productive communication and outcomes to further the work and progress of the blueprint. Next. Thank you. I think we went ahead one. There we go. Review and analyzes MCPS student data to assess MCPS compliance with the blueprint standards as they relate to college and career ready, human resource metrics, pre-K programs, wraparound and support services for students with disabilities, English language learners, and students living in concentrated poverty. And I'll just pause for a second and just remind everyone that the vision of the blueprint was really to help to support all of our students, but also provide some targeted supports to our students who are most in need. And so each of these policy areas really has a theme underneath that really focuses on helping our students most in need. I keep abreast and informed MCPS and keep the county of new legislation related to the blueprint and newer updated criteria of the AIB and offer recommendations for implementation and compliance. I provide input on the budget allocations relative to the blueprint implementation and relevant programs and services in the county's budget process to ensure equitable allocation of funds at the county and state level for programs and efforts that support the implementation of the blueprint. I facilitate productive communication and outcomes to further the work in progress of the blueprint implementation. And I also serve as a liaison between MCPS and the county to facilitate ongoing collaborative efforts to implement the blueprint. Thank you. I'll talk for just a quick minute about the Accountability and Implementation Board. Many of us have been very excited since the beginning of the AIB, since they were launched at the end of November. There have been a number of open and closed sessions. The dates are listed there. There's a session this afternoon at 3 o'clock. They're all available online. And there also will be one on March 17th. All of the AIB members are on board, and they've hired an executive director, Rachel Heiss, who formerly staffed the Kerwin Commission and began officially on February 7th. 4 additional staff will be added in April and more after July 1st, 2022. And on February 14th, Dr. Chowdhury, the state superintendent of schools, presented to the AIB concerning National Board Certified Teachers, college and career readiness, pre-K implementation planning, concentration of poverty statewide, and the new strategic plan for reimagining the Maryland State Department of Education. Those are the things that I referenced earlier about the progress of each of these policy areas. The AIB will provide training for superintendents, principals, and agencies as it relates to blueprint mandates and requirements. So we anticipate some of that training will roll out this summer and in the fall, based on the estimates that we have been given from the AIB. So it's really a delicate balance as we plan, as we start to develop work groups and we start to try to move forward. We also don't want to move too far ahead of the state because they will be coming forth with some guidance, some more specific guidance, these playbooks, which will provide us some written guidance on each of the blueprint policy areas. Thank you. On February 16th, the AIB sent a letter to Governor Hogan, Senate President Honorable Bill Ferguson, and Speaker of the House of Delegates, Honorable Adrian Jones, outlining a revised timeline since the passage of the blueprint was in February 2021, and sharing a preliminary plan for reaching full staffing and requesting a supplemental appropriation in FY22 and urging full funding in FY23. There's a proposed new timeline for the dissemination of criteria for the blueprint planning. So the AIB was to disseminate criteria for the blueprint implementation plans by February 15th, 2022. That has now been moved to September 1st, 2022. The AIB will release a set of criteria, and they will also have a time of public feedback to get some input regarding that criteria. And then the final reports will be submitted from each jurisdiction in March of 2023 rather than June 15th of 2022. That does not mean that there won't be some interim reporting in each of the areas between then and now, but we will, the final implementation plans for each jurisdiction will be due by March 14th, 2023. So our work continues. Our intermittent reporting also continues. They also revised some of the dates for the college and career ready goals that impact FY23, which I mentioned earlier. And they will also develop a process to solicit feedback from advisors on the 5 areas of the blueprint implementation. They have not released that information yet about the advisors, but I believe they're going to launch their website soon, and they're going to post information on there about recruiting advisors. Also, they're soliciting applications to the Maryland State Department of Education for expert review team members who will visit local jurisdictions and monitor and report on the blueprint implementation. For the most part, I think they're looking for teachers, administrators, and those who have been very closely involved in school change. So the AIB is having an opportunity to engage the public and to have a process to gather some feedback, especially when we think about implementing a plan as large as the blueprint in a county as large as ours. So that work will continue and will continue to be actively involved. Next slide. I'll just talk very briefly a little bit about engagement. There's a monthly blueprint coordinators meeting with the Public School Superintendents Association, also the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, including smaller work groups. There's a monthly coordinators meeting that the state has just begun. There's a blueprint Canvas platform that has been designed for blueprint coordinators to send questions internally to MSDE. And also it's now become, it just launched last week, and it's now will become a repository for all of the documents and presentations that are made by the Maryland State Department of Education and the AIB. There are various work groups statewide. Some are initiated by different jurisdictions that are studying each of these policy areas, and we are working together to try to have some consensus and provide some feedback to the state. There are local steering committees that we have launched with broad-based representation. There are work groups that are in progress and some that will begin to be in progress, depending upon the guidance that we have received from the state. There have been a number of successful, actually one was just last night, the HHS forums with the child care community. And I must say this has been a really great way. I'm so pleased to be working with my colleagues in the county government and the council, because these forums are really a way to hear directly from providers in terms of meeting the early care and expansion portion of the blueprint. There have been some surveys given out to gather some feedback, individual and group meetings, and those are upon request of their particular groups. Been going to some of their meetings and presenting on their agendas. There have been some ongoing meetings with the employee organizations, because there are certain aspects of the blueprint, especially the career ladder, that impact the employee organizations, and some portions of the career ladder as the law presents are outlined, and then other parts would be negotiated. There have been a number of presentations to interested groups, and we're working together to plan, and I will help to lead a technical assistance meeting for interested private pre-K programs, because we have found that some of the RFPs and information coming from the state is very dense. So we need to provide more opportunities to answer questions and to be able to support our local providers in order to build the capacity. So it's been a pleasure working with everyone on those things. And that's just sort of a snapshot of where we are. There's a lot more work to come for us to actualize the vision of a blueprint. When we think about some of the changes that it bring about and some of the supports that it could provide, especially for our students most in need, I think it's very closely aligned with our expectations in the county, with the board strategic plan. And I am excited about getting more information as we move forward to support our families and children in Montgomery County. I'll pause there, see if there are any questions.
Excellent. Well, before we turn back to Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez, we do have a couple of questions. Let me turn to Councilmember Navarro first, and then I have a couple of colleagues just text me if you have any questions. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I am not surprised that, these updates, when you really pay attention to the specific elements, I'm not surprised how well aligned they are to Montgomery County's work, because of course, Chairman Rice, you were so instrumental in making sure that those elements were aligned. And so I do want to first thank you for all your work, because it shows very well, very clearly in what this template really contains, which, by the way, is applicable around the state. So I think that is just so exciting. And of course, Mr. Ningbaki, like I am, as you know, your biggest fan. I have always enjoyed so much working with you in the space of early care and education. And I am so excited that you are now leading this particular effort, because as you always used to say, it all begins there. That is the formation, that is the base, the foundation of everything else that we have all pursued in the space of education. So I am just thrilled that you are now leading us in this space. And so I wanted to just ask you, I guess, a bit of a macro question and then a micro question. So in terms of the macro question, I have been reflecting a lot on what the pandemic actually means to the blueprint, not necessarily in terms of deadlines or timelines, et cetera, but in terms of the strategic direction, given that we have had to confront so many changes regarding how we, address issues of education. And not only has it been a disruptor, but I think it has also been an opportunity booster in the sense that it has allowed us to to study and experience possible innovative ways to shift how we address this very vast, system of education, and what we think might be ways to truly pivot, kind of bring it more aligned with like a 2022, which, many experts say that the pandemic has just accelerated all these changes by a factor of 3 to 5 years, right? So in that sense, I'm just curious, what conversations have you had or have you heard? Are there plans to almost kind of take a step back to just envision then what the impact has been, and are there areas that can be tweaked? So first I'll ask you that just as a general question on a macro level.
Well, I will say this first. Thank you so much for your comments. It's a pleasure to be back working with you as well. I think that the impact of the pandemic is that there's been, it has heavily hit our students in terms of learning loss. And I think some of the things that were put in place during the time of the highest level of pandemics in terms of the wraparound services for the students, I think that is a really good trend. And I think it's something that we should try very hard to continue to do, because we not only have to recoup those losses, I think that we have to work together to accelerate the progress of our students, especially certain target groups. And I think the blueprint really does that. Every single pillar of the blueprint focuses again on the most challenging students. I think the other piece of it that's a strength is that we're focusing more on social emotional skills and well-being. And so that in the blueprint, that seems to have almost an equal footing with academics. And so I think when we sort of reimagine what schools can be like under the blueprint, there's as much support for the academic side as there is for the social emotional side. And I think that is really critical. It's one of the landmark pieces in the blueprint. But I think it also helps us, again, to focus on these target groups that are not performing as well. While at the same time, we're raising the achievement of all the students, I think we've got to work really hard to recoup those losses and to accelerate progress. And I think that's one of the things that it's taught us. You can't just do business as usual. And then what are the things as we come out of the pandemic that we need to try to continue to provide that we provided during the pandemic, because the students still have a need, even though we may be transitioning out of a pandemic, we hope. But what are those types of supports that we have provided that perhaps we can work to try to continue to provide because they're needed?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What is your overall sense in terms of MCPS? I mean, you worked at MCPS, worked in the space of early care and education, and we have been tracking, obviously, the demographic changes. And when we talk about, those students that need it most, once upon a time, it was a small group. It was a small numbers, right? And we kind of knew geographically where these areas of needed focus were, et cetera. It seems to me that obviously things have changed dramatically in terms of student population. And obviously, I think the pandemic literally came to affect even students or families that in the past we may have not referred to them as being, of need or having high, impact. It kind of like, exacerbated things, but also affected families and socioeconomic levels, et cetera, that before perhaps we did not integrate that. What is your sense of what that looks like, 2022 versus even, previously to 2020 for MCPS?
I agree with that statement completely, and I absolutely support that assumption. During the time of the pandemic, I think it revealed a lot more vulnerability that was in the community, and certainly for families that might have been sort of teetering on the edge, that they went down below that level. So I think it demonstrated that there is a much greater need for the pre-K, and I think it's perhaps more widespread across the county rather than just in some of the targeted areas that we previously looked at in the trends in previous years. Again, I think the need is greater. One of the things that I like about the blueprint that I think is going to benefit us is that, one, we're initially starting with the students who are most in need. And I think we're working to take a look at some of those numbers. And I think Ms. Robinson in her report really sort of gets at what those numbers are. In conversations with our demographer, I think we're pretty much in a very similar range in terms of estimating those numbers of students. But the blueprint eventually, as we continue to roll it out, is also going to capture a lot of those students whose families are above the 300% of poverty. I mean, for many years, the pre-K enrollment was 185% of poverty. Now we're moving to 300% of poverty. Certainly, there are a lot of children in that range, but then it will move from 300 to 600%. So it will include a lot of other working families who may not be eligible for subsidies or other programs, but who are also still struggling to provide for their families, and they want their children to be in high quality programs as well. So as the blueprint tiers out, it allows an opportunity for us to serve those families as well, using perhaps a sliding scale or some smaller tuition-based program. But I think the need's greater, and I think it will continue to grow. And so, I have seen that grow, the numbers grow over the years, but again, as you said, exacerbated by the pandemic. But I don't think that when the pandemic transitions out, that those families are going to then move back up to the status that they had financially and otherwise. So I think that the numbers that we have, and as they continue to grow, it will continue, and I believe it will become greater.
Thank you for that. Lastly, what I'll say is that, of course, the good news is that our early care and education initiative that we all, adopted in 2019, I had the privilege of authoring that initiative and very much incorporating so many of these elements that we have studied and that we have identified throughout the years. I think is so aligned, of course, and we did that on purpose as well, right? It's very aligned. And luckily, it was passed in 2019 before we even knew that there was going to be a pandemic. So the foundation is there, and there's alignment, and that is going to help us so much in the county as we move, forward with a blueprint. I also wanted to know with the local steering committees, of course, we need to make sure that it's absolutely reflective and representative of our community, especially when you look at in the school system, the very high growth, for example, of the Latino student population. We want to make sure that we incorporate, as much as possible, parents' voices that understand the needs of this community on a very, very culturally proficient sort of level. And then same thing with the career ladder, really, truly being intentional to make sure that, students that might be interested in education, that we do everything possible to recruit students that reflect the student population in general so they can go through that. But also, as we've done for so many years at MCPS, obviously with our support personnel, staff, and any other opportunity, it's the only way we're going to grow that particular, ladder in that pipeline of teachers that do reflect our student population. So just putting another, emphasis, sort of exclamation point on the importance of for us to do that as well and be very intentional.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Thank you very much for that feedback. And I'm, as I attend meetings and talk with other people across the state, I'm really proud to talk about the infrastructure that we have in Montgomery County in terms of supporting the early childhood community and taking a look at all of the resources that we have available locally, because there are some limited resources available at the state level, but in terms of really digging deep, looking at the research and trying to provide that infrastructure as a county, I think we're in a good place. And I'm really proud to talk about the things that we have in Montgomery County as I talk with other folks from around the state, who maybe some of them kind of starting at a much lower point than where we are. So I'm very happy about that. And as we all continue to collaborate and work together, we're also advocating at the same time to get as many resources as we can to help build the capacity of our community providers and of our programs. So absolutely. I think we were hearing directly from some of the voices that are engaged in the work and or very highly impacted by the work.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bucky. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Navarro. Council President Albornoz.
Thank you for that incredible presentation, and I see a lot of familiar faces on the governance committee, including my former boss, which is former County Executive Ike Leggett. So you've got some outstanding leaders that are going to help shepherd this through. To follow up on the track of questions and comments from my colleague, Councilmember Navarro, I had the same exact thought as I was going through the blueprint, that times have changed so dramatically since the beginning of the pandemic. And I associate myself with everything that she said. I'll note one thing too, as part of the social and emotional construct that we want to provide within our school structure, those support programs and services, those extracurricular programs and services are really important. And here in our community, we established an initiative called Excel Beyond the Bell, which is now in many of our middle schools and now in 3 of our high schools. And with the previous and this council, we're hoping to expand even further. But those extracurricular activities that extend into the summer are really important now, especially acknowledging that it's impossible and unrealistic for us to expect all of the needs, both academic as well as social emotional, to be met during the school day with all the complexities that existed prior to the pandemic and what we're feeling right now. So I think sort of a complementary blueprint or initiative at some point that expands on the great work and the phenomenal recommendations that, and I so love that there is this emphasis on social emotional and that it is getting equal billing to the academic component, because you can't have one without the other, is so important. So it's just sort of a general comment and thought that I had to see how we can supplement and enhance the opportunities that exist within communities. And then to highlight one other point that Councilmember Navarro brought up as well, this notion of a holistic model to support the entire family, including mom and dad, or whatever family dynamic there may be, is really important as well. And seeing how we can be intentional about that, so that in addition to having those voices at the table authentically, legitimately, to be part of the decision-making process, that they be given the tools and resources and help necessary to further supplement the academic and social and emotional needs of their children. Because all of us are feeling pretty overwhelmed at the moment. I have 4 kids in our family with every resource imaginable and with the kind of support structure that most people dream of, is still, facing a lot of challenges. So those are just some general comments, and didn't know if you had any reflections or responses to those comments.
I do. I think that is a really great question. One of the things that the blueprint brings is concentration of poverty grants that identify community schools. So it began a few years back under Kerwin dollars, and it looks at schools that have 80% eligibility for free and reduced meals and goes down to 55% by FY26. So the blueprint provides direct dollars to those community schools in order to provide a community schools coordinator, and that is a designated person who is working to build these partnerships around the school and to bring these extra services to the children and families, behavioral health being one of those key services. So we have 19 community schools that have come on board in the last 2 years, and then we have 6 additional schools that are coming on board. So they're really focused on the most highly impacted schools, and they bring a variety of services for the child as well as for the family. Some of the programs have through contractual agreements, linkages to learning and other types of behavioral supports. It can be after school tutoring, they can have food pantries, there can be English language classes for parents, it's a whole host of services that are provided and targeted to those schools. So it's really starting with the schools that are highest in need. But the other piece I'd like to add to that is for the blueprint also provides a provision for behavioral health and trauma training for all school staff system-wide. And so that training also incorporates providing resources for teachers in schools across the county to really look at handling how they might detect and handle if there's a situation going on, even if it's something that might be in the community that's sort of spilling over into the school. There are cohorts of behavioral health training that are also targeted to specific schools that are rolling out through the whole system. There's restorative justice training that is rolling out through the whole system in different cohorts. There's schools working on mindfulness, and we're rolling that out, in a staggered plan across the whole school system. So I think that there's been a lot of groundwork already laid to focusing on the social emotional. I think the blueprint dovetails that very well. And so all of these efforts combined will really, it raises the importance and the training and the time towards focusing on behavioral health supports. And I think that's something that we really have to consider, even if we look at what's happening with what will happen with the career ladder. It will provide leadership opportunities for teachers, but with some of that time that they have that releases them from the classroom, they're supposed to be tutoring students, focusing on the students that are not performing as well. What are some additional supports we can provide for them? How are we helping challenging students? So it all kind of circles back to that, and the blueprint it really dovetails the work that we're already doing in NCPS. There has been a lot of existing work around behavioral health and social skills. And so this really just builds onto it. So there are different staggered cohorts going on. And I think that is, it is very, very important as we go forward. Even prior to the pandemic, I think we have all seen the importance of focusing on the social emotional wellness. Also in the public sector, there have been a number of reports that were released regarding the impact of social media and how for teens especially, it can impact their image. It can also contribute to depressive symptoms. And so finding some ways to help support our students, help support their parents is only going to help them to deal with the pandemic related situations even better. So thank you so much for that comment.
Thank you. Really well said. Chairman Rice, I'll turn it back to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Council President. I've got Council Vice President Glass.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the conversation and my colleagues' insightful questions. And so the unique framework from which, county government at all different levels, and as Council President Albornoz noted, the esteemed members of some of those groups. I'm curious from your perspective, kind of getting ahead of the curve here. What should we as the council, aside from our statutory responsibilities and the budgets, and it's all outlined in the packet, but what do you think we should be looking at right now? What aside from this conversation and the work that we know needs to go years ahead, what should we be looking out for, or what kind of help or assistance do you or the system need from us at this point?
I'm also going to maybe open this up to some of my other colleagues who've been working on some of these initiatives and things for a while and looking at it. But I think there's going to come a time when I think we're ramping up our efforts. We've got some funding from the state. We're moving forward. But there's going to come a time when the blueprint dollars are going to sunset. And so we're going to, as a county, have to take on what those particular costs are. And so I think that we've got to be always thinking ahead about the sustainability of some of these additional supports and things that the blueprint is going to bring, in addition to what we may already have happening in the school system and how they work together. So I think sustainability, it's going to provide tutoring. It's going to provide lots of these other types of programs that we're already doing. The blueprint complements that, but at some point that's going to sunset. So I think we've got to be thinking long-term about how we're going to be able to maintain these various programs, especially the ones that are targeting our students who are most in need. I think in general, finding additional ways, and I think everyone's taking a good look at that, trying to recruit and retain teachers. The blueprint actually provides for that. But how are we going to, as a county, make make it exciting for people to come and want to teach in Montgomery County, and whether they're in the community-based programs or in the school system programs. I know some of the community-based folks have been talking about the compensation issues and trying to, take a look at finding some parity if you want to teach in a community-based setting or in the public school. And so I think we're working to try to take a look at that, at some of the disparities that might exist in terms of the benefits or other benefits to staying in childcare and providing that. And then I think we also have to look at the implications. And I think Ms. Robinson's report that she published really talks a little bit to that. What will be the implications for us moving forward in terms of providing care for infants and toddlers? If the state is targeting the dollars through the grants for 3 and 4 year olds, will some programs then shift to that? Will that impact how we, the availability of toddler care? So I think we've got to look at all those implications. I think we've got to look at the, what's going to happen as we go a few years out, and then work as hard as we can as a county to maintain some of these additional supports that the blueprint provides, that we're already providing for our students. Because I think I just saw a presentation to the board the other day about some tutoring and wraparound academic services, and the families and students that participated in the tutoring, they had greater outcomes than the ones that did not. So engaging families and keeping those supports in place, because the pandemic has hit us very hard. And so we've got to not only recoup the losses, but we've got to accelerate the learning. So I think that's what I would say. But there may be some other colleagues on the.
Well, if I could just say, and then I'll yield back so we can further the conversation and bring more people in. But this work started, and the vision for this started before the pandemic. As has been noted in this and many other conversations, the pandemic underscored the need for this work. It exacerbated the work, and we need to double down on this work. And I think everything that you outlined and said is absolutely true, that if we want this to succeed, we need to put systems in place for it to succeed. And so I appreciate you sharing the need for foresight and for future conversation and consideration, because these decisions, whether they're easy or tough on future bodies, at the council, at the Board of Education, at the state, they are going to be necessary for this to succeed and to help every student learn, and to help our teachers and all the other incredible support staff, the village that is necessary to make this successful. So I appreciate the conversation today, and I look forward to many more conversations moving forward. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'll be delighted to come and provide additional updates.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And before I turn to Councilmember Tawando, I just want to remind folks that we also do have the fiscal part. So that ties into some of the questions that you have, Council Vice President Glass, and then we also have pre-K part of the presentation as well. But let me turn to Councilmember Tawando.
Thank you, and appreciate the comments of colleagues, and it's good to see you as our great coordinator, Ms. McNean, and I'm glad that you're there and continuing your great work. I wanted to ask, one of the things that was alluded to a little bit here, but I wanted to really put a fine point on it. Blueprint is an awesome, comprehensive document. Obviously, none of it works if we don't have the teachers and leaders and educators in supporting our students, making sure they have what they need, their families. And this has been a tough time for all of us. And we know, educators in particular have had to deal with a lot. And one of I think the great things about the blueprint, and will be reflected in the budget going forward, which also connects to your sustainability point that you made, we need to make sure that we are creating, the environment and pathways and compensation and benefits and training and flexibility for our educators. One of 4 of whom nationwide considered leaving the profession last year. And, we talk about this, the Great Resignation. I think it's kind of under discussed about, how it's impacted the workforce of educators, in addition to all the people who are of retirement age, right? So you just layer that on. And so the fact that we're going, one of the blueprint recommendations obviously is to increase salaries up to starting at 60,000, which would still put us, middle of the road, globally and versus other parts of the country. I just wanted to get your feedback on that part of it, the workforce part of it, that we need to be supported to make sure that we can implement these things with fidelity and support all students and families and create all the great outcomes we want. Just how you see that being on track and the importance of that piece.
I think that part is really important because we have been, over the last several years, reaching a time when many people are many people are retiring out of the profession. So there's been an impact nationally, but as well as locally. And so I think the blueprint provides the additional 10% over by 2024 to increase teacher salaries. And then the national board certification would be an additional $10,000 if you're in one of those identified roles by the blueprint, and then an additional $7,000 for the low performing schools. So I think that these incentives will help to keep people in the profession. I went online to listen to one of the Senate budget hearings the other day, and I heard one of the legislators mention that he lived in Montgomery County, and he had been talking with a gentleman who was going to move out of state. And when he heard that he was able to get an additional $10,000 as a national board certified teacher, he opted to stay in the county with his family. So I think it will definitely help to recruit people. And if they're making a decision about what state to go after they graduate from colleges and universities across the state, if they know that we'll have a starting salary of $60,000 in 2026, if they know that there are opportunities for leadership development through the career ladder, I'm hoping that that will attract many of them to stay in Maryland and to come to Montgomery County. But that is a real critical point, and that's one of the pieces of the blueprint. And I think that it does have a big price tag. It does. But I also think that it's really important to be able to encourage our workforce to increase their credentials, to really kind of sharpen their skills. And the Maryland State Department of Education has identified a number of studies nationally that are following cohorts of teachers in schools where they need to increase achievement. And those teachers have the national board certification. So they will be providing us with some updates about that, and that we are hopeful that the impact of the infusion of more nationally board certified teachers will help our students. But that piece is really important. That piece is important. And I don't want to also at the same time diminish the impact of the supporting services staff and the administrators as well. The blueprint primarily focuses on teachers. It does have other portions for the administrative staff as well. But I think recruiting and maintaining a strong workforce and a diverse workforce is going to be really critical to the success of our schools and moving them forward. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, and the diversity point of growing our own and making, the almost unicorn-like numbers of like 2% of teachers being Black male teachers, and 8% being Black, and then even similarly low numbers for Latino teachers, and obviously disproportionately women. I think women do a great job, but obviously we need all types of folks in our classrooms. I think this will really, really help. And I'm glad you brought that point up, and glad to hear that anecdotal story about someone staying in the profession. So
yes.
Really appreciate that. Look forward to continued conversations. I know we have the other parts of the presentation, but I'm glad you underscored that it's a big price tag, but we're going to have to maintain the commitment. There's no way to do it. There's no way to do it if we don't maintain our commitment and continue to grow it. So really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Joanna, because you teed up when it comes to some of the fiscal challenges that we have in terms of making sure that we stay on track and that we are responsive to what we're seeing in the greater community that you heard Ms. Aki talk about, which is that, look, at the end of the day, we have competing interests now. And the whole reason why we decided to move forward with some of the aspects of Blueprint regarding teacher salaries is because we saw other countries. So we're not just talking about here in the United States, but across the world. We saw other countries that had teachers at a different salary level. And so it really is commensurate to other competing interests that have the same level of requirements of education to get to that place. I mean, keep in mind, many of our teachers, as you heard from Ms. Baki and others, are folks who have got their master's degrees. And so from that standpoint, and then become board certified teachers, that's a lot of schooling. And when you take that same level of schooling and apply it to any of these other career pathways that are out there, you're talking about people getting six-figure salaries. And so the dedication that it requires to be a teacher, but then also coupling that with lower salary threshold is one of the challenges. And I mean, we talked about this in the meeting, and I said, imagine a young person who grows up in an impoverished area, who actually has a chance, because of access to education, to go on to college and to graduate, and then go on to, to graduate school and then get a graduate degree. And then we expect them to come back to that same neighborhood where they struggled and again struggle again because they're making a lower salary tier than their peers who have decided to go on to other private sector jobs. Why would we expect that? And why would we want that? And so it's a no-brainer that we see the challenges that we see, because those, the best and brightest in our communities of color and those of socioeconomic status, are looking for ways to break that two-generational poverty that we so often talk about. And the way to do that, unfortunately, had not been by being a teacher. You were relegated to live in that same cycle, right? Although a little bit better, but still not where, folks really need to be able to break that cycle. And so that's the reason why I think that it really is important for us to really focus on this and to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep up with where our requirements are. And so with that, let me turn it over to Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez to talk to us about some of the government responsibilities and fiscal requirements.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the great conversation. Yeah, so I want to start with this section and just preface it by saying that council staff has been working very closely with our Office of Management and Budget team, Office of Intergovernmental Relations, and MCPS Finance to make sure we're understanding the new pieces of information that are available regarding the local fiscal impacts of the blueprint as well as the state aid piece. And for today's session, we want to keep it at a high-level overview as we're just entering the fiscal year 23 operating budget review process here at the council. And so we hope to provide more in-depth analysis and additional information that comes from the state on these local numbers at the future Montgomery County Public School operating budget session, as well as joint sessions with HHS on some of the mental health and more pieces. So I'm just going to share my screen again. And hopefully there's no problems this time. Just moving to the next slide. So one of the big pieces for fiscal year 23 is that now counties are required to fund either the greater of maintenance of effort, which we know, or the local share sum. And so for both of these pieces, there's been changes. So in fiscal year 22, there's been changes to the calculation of maintenance effort, which again, we'll discuss in a future operating budget session, but it was to address enrollment challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And for the local share sum, the new requirements include what I've listed here. So previously it was a share of the foundation formula related to the Thornton Commission founding formulas, but now we have pieces in the compensatory education, English language learners, and special education funding formulas, the comparable wage index, full day pre-K, and college and career readiness, as well as transitional supplemental instruction, career ladder grant programs, and concentration of poverty grants. And so at this time, what we do know is that the Department of Legislative Services at the state level, as well as our Office of Management Budget, have determined that tentatively that maintenance of effort is greater than the local share for fiscal year 23, and it's estimated to be so through fiscal year 28 for Montgomery County. Now, the information I presented above is from a January 2022 Department of Legislative Services report on the local fiscal impacts. And in addition to the local share, we have, of course, the blueprint state aid to Montgomery County Public Schools. And at the Board of Education's transmittal in February, they noted that they received $38.8 million from the state. And this chart here summarizes the breakdown of that funding with the note that the pre-kindergarten funding at the bottom, about $2.7 million, is earmarked for publicly funded private pre-K providers in the county. And so that's the fiscal discussion we wanted to present today. And as I mentioned before, this information is constantly evolving, and we will present more analysis along with the operating budget discussion. And now I can turn it over to Ms. Adele Robinson if there are no questions on that section to discuss the pre-kindergarten and early education and care update.
Excellent. Let's turn to Ms. Robinson.
Hi, good morning. And thank you for allowing me to be part of your discussion today. It was really exciting to look at the impact of a blueprint preschool development at the state and its impact on Montgomery County, which has already done, as you've heard so much, to shore up early childhood, particularly childcare. I do want to give you a couple caveats. The report was delivered in October, so it was pre-Omicron. And so certain variables may have changed about capacity in particular as programs continue to be in flux about what they are providing to whom and where. There's also been a small change. Every year, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services puts out a new federal poverty level, and it's gone up just a little bit. So some of these numbers would be adjusted a little bit. And then I also want to raise that the issue of financing private childcare providers or community-based childcare providers, inflation is a big issue. The costs will significantly change, and whether the rates, as we'll discuss, will even make them whole is something to consider. So if we could start with the first slide. Next slide. Thank you. So thank you for the overview of what you've been accomplishing in your early care and education initiative. Just wanted to raise a couple more. As an advocate for early childhood, I thank you for raising the working parents assistant eligibility to serve more parents. And these two other studies I'm told are in procurement. These are really critical to informing your decisions about financing and where to direct those dollars in an equitable way. Next slide. So just a reminder of a high-level overview of the blueprint for Maryland's preschoolers. It is only 3 and 4-year-olds. This is not a birth to 5 strategy. It funds 6.5 hours a day, 180 days, essentially a school calendar. That does leave 79 days where most parents are working in addition to these 180 days, as well as the wraparound for before and after to match a working parent schedule, a traditional work schedule. The blueprint in the statute sets out the amount per year of the per pupil. It starts at $10,094. There was a study conducted several years ago in Maryland, a cost pre-K study by Simon Workman and Ann Mitchell, who put that as closer to 15 or 16,000. So just to be clear about that. It is a mixed delivery system. Maryland historically has been primarily a public school pre-K delivery system. It is now shifting with the preschool development grants and the pre-K expansion grants at the state level. The blueprint does require an increase starting at 30% in the first year to be delivered outside of the public school system, rising to 50%. But as we'll see, the real issue here that I think you need to address is if there are eligible providers. It doesn't mean 30% automatically, rising to 50% automatically. You need to meet the standards as a community base, and those standards are primarily set for a public school system. It is universally available, but it's not free like kindergarten or DC, so that's important to remember. Most parents will be paying a fee. If you're below 300% of the federal poverty level, it is free for those 6.5 hours, 180 days. But right above that, you start paying a sliding scale fee, essentially a parent copay for pre-K, whether you're in a public school setting or a community-based setting, as well as the copay you'll be paying for childcare. And above 600%, essentially, this is private school. So next slide. There are quality criteria as well on the provider. The blueprint requires your Excels, your quality rating system for your early care and education programs, that they have a couple of years to reach the top level, which has many quality criteria. And so these numbers are from July 2021. So if you go back and you think always about what does this mean for achieving mixed delivery, there were 79 who were level 5. Luckily, the blueprint gives you a couple years to get there, but you can see there are 160 at level 3. I didn't even look at level 2, level 1 for this slide. It's always more in every state that are and county are at the lower levels. And so part of the capacity building is to meet this criteria. A significant issue in the blueprint, and the National Academy of Sciences did recommend a bachelor degree in early childhood education some years ago. But the question is not whether it's a degree, the question is, can people get to the degree and what is the support they have? The blueprint requires not only a bachelor's degree, but the state teacher certification. Or if you are coming in with a bachelor's degree, but not in early childhood or related field, there's the alternative pathway to certification. Montgomery County doesn't have one of those pathway programs yet. So by comparison, when also thinking about capacity building, the state pre-K expansion grant also requires that community-based programs have a teacher with a BA and state certification. And there were 9 of those grants to community-based providers in Montgomery County in 2021. Next slide. So let's look at capacity in terms of seats, because there's a guarantee in essence that a seat will be available. It does stagger in enrollment by age of child and which and the tier for the children. But if we use, just for scenario building, that there's on average 11,000 children, it's pretty constant, are entering Montgomery County Public Schools. And if 40.5% of them, according to the Community Needs Assessment in 2021, were living in families earning less than 300% of the federal poverty level. This is how it sort of starts breaking down. Now, you do start with 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds in Tier 1, and there's a stagger. You'll see a chart in a moment. But this is a lot more children than are being served now, whether it's childcare, Head Start, or public schools. And so you're going to be having parents lining up, being told that there's a pre-K seat available, hopefully at a setting of their choice, that mixed delivery is robust. And you're going to have to figure out how to get to 7,000 additional seats for the blueprint pre-K to meet the numbers that it's talking about. Next slide. So just to give you a sense of where they are, when you get to 50%, the last quadrant, that's now we're looking at the number in Montgomery County as well as in public schools because it's 50-50. So that's where you're essentially close to the 7,000 number. This, of course, did not include Tier 3. There's, I think, a real question whether your high income households will be sending, if they have to pay for public school, will it be different than paying for traditionally private school pre-Ks they've been in? So I did not include them. So this may be a low estimate. So this is just gives you a sense of the staggering in. If you were to actually have enough eligible providers, which we hope you'll get to, for the mixed delivery system. So next slide, please. So we've talked about shortage of qualified teachers in K-12. It's always been a problem in early childhood. Compensation is so low that we have high turnover within programs, within the field, and leaving the field. And here, because of the blueprint's high expectations, qualifications for teachers, we're really looking at a bar for the community-based programs that, frankly, is rather fast in the blueprint. When you look at this, you're going to need about 334 lead teachers and 334 teacher assistants. With these degrees, the teacher assistant will have to have a CDA or associate degree. In your childcare licensing, by the way, those are already teachers and directors. So you can see a shuffle of roles, even within early childhood. Your state early childhood educator scholarship will probably need to be increased, and I would say enhanced. You are going to need a lot more counseling for the entry into college for people who are first generation, maybe have never had any experience with the higher education system in this country, language issues. And then there's, of course, it's not just about entering college, it's about graduating. And then there's the praxis, which the scholarship doesn't pay for either. At the same time, you're going to have to keep moving forward enough teacher assistants so that we have the right ratios in the classroom. I want to be clear that this is not about infants and toddlers in the blueprint. What those are the childcare licensing regulations. We already have a very high shortage. Montgomery County is not different than anywhere else of infant and toddler teachers. And the potential for our infant and toddler teachers who have a CDA or associate degree to then move up in the career pathway, but also move over and away from infant toddler classrooms to preschool classrooms with the promise of some comparable compensation with their public school peers. So something to be clear about, that there's a stratification already in what teachers are receiving in early childhood programs based on age of children they serve, and this could become wider if there isn't an infant toddler strategy. Next slide. So your childcare rates, by the way, you are still using the market rate survey. DC, New Mexico, and other states are now contracting to do a cost of care model. And I see that you are too, which is excellent, because what you will see is that the market rate is what is only what providers feel that they can charge and have enrollment versus the actual cost of care. So if you just look at the market rate, which we know to be depressed from the real cost of care, just wanted to give you a sense of the difference between what is available under the state subsidy program now, which is at around 60th percentile. It went up a couple years ago. You had been at 30 percentile for a long time. But you can see that this is not exactly the cost of care to a provider who has to think about everything from the rent and the mortgage and the lights and the diapers and the staff. Staff is about 80% usually. So good that you're doing a cost of care, but the rates at the state level, which will be the families under 300% of the federal poverty level, primarily, will be in this zone. And so the providers that serve the under 300% of the federal poverty level are still not getting what's going to be needed for a full day, full year cost of care at a quality level. I should remind you that CCDBG does encourage the 75th percentile. Next slide. So there's in the blueprint a couple family scenarios. Again, they were based off of last year, so they would adjust a little bit, but it's important to understand how different families will be dealt with in the system. So in tier 1, you won't have a blueprint fee. It will be free to you. You will still have co-pays for childcare. Your infant is full-time childcare. The rates are what will apply, the market-based rates. The blueprint doesn't offset anything for the infant toddler room. And so there's still a fairly significant amount of money going out the door. In tier 2, you have the WPA subsidy, which you've increased. The infant toddler still dependent on the childcare subsidy fully. There'll be some offset for the family because of free blueprint pre-K. The MSDE sliding scale proposal just came out with 4 different options. They have yet to settle on it. They're looking for public comment, but you'll see that there's still a lot of fees that are on the shoulder of parents, and whether the combination will still hold the provider whole is a question. Obviously, if you're earning above 425%, there isn't any public investment that you don't have to copay or pay for fully. Next slide. So, as you've heard me say a lot, closing the gap should really start from the start. It's not about closing the gap at age 3, it's about closing the gap at least when you're born, if not earlier. You have roughly 6,600 infants and toddlers that are now served by 141 programs with a capacity of about 2,400, so about a third. This is according to the Maryland Family Network's demographic report. So as you can see, you're already at a supply that's well below demand. The funding options, as you've seen, are smaller than for the preschool population. And let's be clear that teachers need specialized knowledge and skills for infants and toddlers as well. There's a lot of development that's going on at this time. But again, the blueprint will not provide them with the same support, particularly in compensation. You have to find that in other resources. So next slide, please. So these are my considerations for what you need to think about. You will be getting your cost of care model and your supply and demand. That will give you a lot of information about where you can be setting rates, but particularly compensation. Your neighbor in the District of Columbia who just had a major development, positive development, where childcare teachers and teacher assistants will get a bonus of $10,000 to $14,000 a year. You need to look very closely at your neighbors to make sure that there isn't a movement out of Montgomery County programs to DC County programs, just so that the providers, the teachers in those programs can make a sustainable or at least a living wage. There's also, I think, a need for more contracts versus the voucher system. You're allowed to do that under the federal child care subsidy. It gives more stable budgeting to a provider. It can give you more options to build in improved compensation compared to a voucher. And it may lead to increased supply when childcare providers feel that their budgets are more stable and workable, and less likely to lose staff because of better rates. Of course, usually most contracts in other places are tied to quality, and you would need to think about that. I think you need to be developing lots of scenarios with your working parents assistants about what does this mean for getting that extra assistance out to, in the tier 2, the lower eligibility levels, not just spreading it equally across. What does this mean for dual language families, special needs families? How are we making sure that underserved populations and underserved communities in the county are really the focus of this child care assistance that is so important to them? I think you need to look closely at your higher education capacity as well. We're going to have a lot of people knocking on the door for a bachelor degree or an associate degree. And is the coursework available? Is the faculty there? Can you meet the needs of working adult learners who are working full-time in a program? Where's the paid release time and the substitute pool, particularly in a shortage? And how can you meet the needs so that they can actually meet the standards of the blueprint, that we're not continuing the barriers to higher education for working adult learners? The state needs to create a workforce registry. Frankly, if you're to have, if they're not, then the county should be doing that, of its licensed providers, to understand who is working in this field, where are they working, what's the compensation and workplace benefits, I might add. What's their demographic makeup? What ages of children are they serving? What's the churning? What's the turnover? How many are actually taking advantage of these scholarships and counseling? And how many of them have in their own workplace, the support from the employer, if they're not family child care, their center director for paid leave and a substitute pool, which is an investment in the program itself for teachers to have more knowledge and skill. And lastly, there's supply building. You've had a report about your childcare deserts. With a lot of people working at home, where to place early childhood programs is shifting for everyone. Facilities financing is so important because we have low-income providers not making a profit and they can't get the loans or the grants. And as you saw, you have a big push of expansion of seats, I would say both infant, toddler, as well as your pre-K. And where are those being placed and how are those being funded? Recognizing that the public schools get a little bit of a boost and recognition in the blueprint, but not a priority for helping with facilities for community-based programs in the blueprint. So I was told to do 10 minutes, probably have run over, but I hope this gives you some sense of direction and where to build off of your current strong foundation.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Robinson. And let me just say that I'm very excited because as Councilmember Navarro alluded to, and we've just created a new entity here in Montgomery County that is partnering with our private sector, private philanthropy, as well as our public sector to bring all of these ideas on how to really hone in on early care and education. And your recommendations and considerations are perfect as a starting point for them to really start to jump into how we can make our system better. And I appreciate you acknowledging some of the great work that's already gone into place to get us to the point that we are in. But as I've said before, with so many conversations, just being good is not enough. And we continue to aspire to be great because that's what our folks need. And so from that standpoint, you know, you've given us certainly some great pathways to be able to get to that great level using the framework of Blueprint. And so just really wanted to say thank you. I'm going to turn to some of my colleagues who have reached out to me, starting with Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. And it's great to see you, Adele. I worked with Adele when Ms. Robinson, I'll be formal, for 12 years ago or so when she was at the National Association for Education of Young Children. And I was a junior staffer on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And just watching this presentation was such a reminder of, you know, your work and really honing in on the things that you've dedicated your life to. So I just want to say that in public and thank you. I'm so glad we've got you helping us now here in the county and have contracted with you. It was a smart decision to whoever did that in the administration to complement a great team we already have. And you acknowledge that there's a lot that's been done. But as with this issue, you know, I remember we were working on back then in the reauthorization of higher ed, trying to put in incentives to increase the credentialing and pay of early childhood educators then. And that's obviously still a huge issue for us. And I appreciated the mix of both kind of long-term systemic solutions, but also really practical, like that DC is doing this raise in the next year. And we have to be, you know, cognizant of that and make sure that we are not losing in a workforce that's already, you know, understaffed and underpaid as we try to build this system. So, but the good thing is we have put a lot in place, and I'm really excited that with all the colleagues, we have this new entity, this public-private entity that will be able to take the bull by the horns here and work on these things in a coordinated way. So I guess my question to you would be, among the list of things that you laid out, you know, what's the most urgent, time-sensitive thing that at the county level, you know, and that you think we should be doing to make sure that we're on track with everything that, you know, that's laid out in the blueprint, but also with what your understanding of our plans as we've set them out here at the county level with the new public-private entity?
Oh, wow. Always just to come down to one or two.
I know it's hard, but yeah.
So I would say short term, I think the cost of care study will give you a real sense of the gap between what's going on with the payment of child care providers in the whole birth to 5 space and where the subsidies need to go. And that's both state and your county ones, because the state's only going to go so far. The rates now are so depressed that it's hard to think about capacity building, really. And capacity building at quality, even with the Excel's bump that there is. So I think thinking really hard about your childcare system as being made whole so that it is possible for them to use the blueprint as almost like a supplement in a way. Like, should I participate in the blueprint? Great. Should I not participate in the blueprint? And there are plenty of families who want to use me. I could still be very high quality and affordable. Because remember, 50% is going to be in the public schools.
Right.
Not every provider is going to be necessarily participating in the blueprint. So you have to make them whole, and they may be in communities where parents favor those programs instead of the public schools. They may be in communities that favor the public schools, and they don't even have those 3- and 4-year-old blueprint slots. So I think the funding of childcare is really critical. I would pay a lot of attention to infant toddler care, because if you're going to show that your pre-K, blueprint pre-K is successful, it rests on the foundation of birth to 3 as opposed to catch up with a 3 or 4-year-old and then doing your kindergarten entry assessment just to find out it's not as wonderful as you had hoped by instituting blueprint pre-K, because it is a 2-year dosage of 180 days, 6.5 hours, and you have all of birth to 3 it rests on. So if I had to pick 2, I think that would be it. I think the fact that you're doing equity assessments is really critical, because with new resources, not just going to the usual people that they always go to, is really important. I think you will need to work with MSTE about the future of the pre-K expansion grant, which is now at $13,000 per child, compared to the blueprint at $1094. There may be providers who say, if you're going to keep doing the pre-K expansion grant, different than the supplemental, right, which is probably going to go away, why would I do the blueprint when I can get more for at least a couple years? So I think you need to work on with the state on some synergy between all these programs, some alignment, because that will determine which providers go into what funding stream.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It was a very hard question. I realize, but New York to the task, and we have our work to do as well. So appreciate that. I could keep going, but I know other colleagues have questions, so we'll follow up offline. But really glad.
Great.
Thank you for the report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Tawanda. And so, Ms. Robinson, I'm curious, because I know that the role of family support centers and Judy centers is key and integral to this. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts there in terms of what Montgomery County needs to do when it comes to its support of those, especially as we talk about birth to 3, which really is squarely in the focus of where Judy centers and family support centers are, and what's your thoughts there in terms of what it is that we as a county can do to help support those mothers and fathers who are really trying to make sure that their children have the start that they need.
Thank you for that. And my report I didn't focus on Judy centers, because I was really being asked to talk about seats for childcare. Obviously, the Judy centers are important as a comprehensive approach. It would be great if they were very well married to where the actual seats are as well, right? So you meet families and children where they are. And so I think one of your planning needs to be where, if there's a big expansion of the Judy centers in the blueprint, and where are those going to be located? What's going to be the connection to the community-based providers, so that services aren't being duplicated, but that there's a strong cohesion between the two and a trust, obviously, between those two systems. I would say that, what I had hoped, we might also look at as a county, former resident, is the growth of early Head Start. That that's a place where it's both center-based and family childcare, and it could marry with your Judy centers, particularly on the birth to 3. There are very few early Head Start slots in Montgomery County. Early Head Start's not well funded from the feds yet, and unfortunately the new appropriations bill is a little drop in the bucket. We hope for something bigger down the road. But I think the real question is, how do you make sure comprehensive services are actually where the children are for 10 hours a day, 40 hours a week potentially, and the availability to reach the communities that haven't been using Judy centers. I think a lot of issues about where things will be placed is important. We've had demographic shifts, we've had workplace shifts, we have certainly deserts for these programs, whether it's a Judy Center or a childcare seat. So I think really mapping, doing a mapping study, I know we just did one for New Hampshire, doing a mapping study, as I think you're doing with your supply and demand, so that we're not continually to offering the same comprehensive services, but it takes transportation and other factors that keep them out of reach.
No, thank you for that. That is great, and I hope that well, I know I was taking notes, and I know my staff's taking notes, but I hope that we certainly put forth all of those recommendations to our early care education coordinating entity as things that we can take forward to try and make sure that we're moving. I did just want to ask one last question with regards to the president's announcement via his State of the Union about IDEA Part C. And the hope that there is some additional funding that comes that way. What is your thought when it comes to leveraging federal dollars and the look at understanding that supports for students, especially when it comes to early intervention, is incredibly important, and whether or not we can see some additional funding coming from the federal government to help us in that regard?
Well, historically, Part C has been sort of the poor stepchild of IDEA because it's not part of Part B, and the school boards don't spend a lot of time advocating for its increase. I wouldn't say none, but not in the same way. So the federal landscape, as you know, was very much in flux between inflation and now Ukraine, and I guess we considered ourselves pretty much out of COVID. Yesterday, the House and Senate finalized an agreement on the appropriations for this current fiscal 2022 that ends in September. It is far less than we anticipated in early childhood. You know, we thought we were going to get 1.4 billion for childcare. It's like 254 million nationally. I did not see, I have not looked at since yesterday, a breakdown for Part C. I did see some increase in Part B, which is your preschool again. Part B has the 619, but I haven't checked on early intervention. But clearly we know that there are more children who are probably eligible if we were doing child find and appropriate assessments. I do worry that there are children with early childhood providers who may not know when to ask for a child to be assessed, as opposed to thinking this is normal development, and that's not easy, right? That really takes specialized assessment knowledge. And so I think this goes into our infant toddler teacher question of what are people educated to know and be able to do with infants and toddlers as well. But I could get back to you on the Part C numbers this afternoon. But all in all, the split with defense really lowered our domestic numbers. Apparently the president's budget request for the next year is supposed to come out next week, we think. It's always a blueprint, so to speak, of what they want versus necessarily what they'll get. There is some talk of going back to whatever will be the new variation of Build Back Better in April. And the question of whether we'll be able to hold on to our early childhood pieces, both of them, will make a significant difference to Montgomery County. I would also remind people that there's still ARPA money out there to be spent, and to make sure that it's spent wisely, but also not to have a cliff, because that was temporary money.
Well, Ms. Robinson, I, like Councilmember Joando, could go on talking to you for an extended period of time. Your wealth of knowledge.
I told you so.
Your ideas are incredibly important. And so from that standpoint, we are very appreciative of you serving in this capacity as being a contractor and working with us to help guide us in this work. And it's perfect timing. It just couldn't be more perfect in terms of what it is that we're trying to do, laying out a focus on early care and education as a part of the larger blueprint legislation. So with that, let me turn it over to Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez to see if there are any other things that are before us. I think we've kind of covered it all at this point.
Yes, Chair Rice, we've concluded our presentation at this time.
Excellent. I don't see any other things from my colleagues. I know that one of our colleagues, Councilmember Navarro, had to jump off for a 12 o'clock meeting, but did just want to thank all of my colleagues. We had some really great discussion today and really had a great opportunity to just talk about what our expectations are for our education system moving forward. We've got a great synopsis of the simple fact that there's a lot of work to be done. It's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to require a lot of effort on our parts. All the things that we acknowledged when we first met as the current commission and the things that were acknowledged when the legislature passed the blueprint for Maryland's future. And so from that standpoint, colleagues, for those of us who are transitioning off of the council, I leave it in good hands. To those of you to carry the torch and continue to make sure that we're fighting to see that this vision comes to reality. We know what's at stake, and there's a reason why they titled it The Blueprint for Maryland's Future. It is about the future of our community as a whole, as well as the future of education across this great nation. So, because if we can stand up, this is an example, there are other jurisdictions across the United States that will use this as a model, much as which akin to what we did when it came to the Massachusetts miracle, and looked at that as a guiding principle for us in shaping the legislation that we move forward. So from that standpoint, again, thanks to my colleagues, appreciate it. Mr. Co-Chair, any closing remarks from you, sir? No? Okay. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you so much, Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez. Colleagues, take care and have a great rest of the day.
$66 million and